Welcome to the fourth type of access control model, which is attribute-based access control or ABAC. Among all the four models, I would say that this is the smartest one. Not the most widely used one, but it is the smartest one. Let's formally define it. Attribute-based access control or ABAC is an authorization model that evaluates attributes or characteristics associated with the user, who's the subject, rather than roles to determine the access. So the basic idea is that instead of checking the roles or defining roles, we check the attributes or characteristics of the subject. Let me give you a real-world example which is going to make it crystal clear. So let's say you're traveling overseas and once at your destination, you want to watch a movie on your Netflix account. However, when you try to start the movie, it says this content is not available in your location. That's a classic example of attribute-based access control, which essentially means that Netflix takes the decision of allowing or rejecting viewing based on number one, whether you have an active subscription, and secondly, are you currently located in the geographic location specified on your profile? So subscription plus the location. So these both conditions or characteristics or attributes need to be checked before Netflix decides whether you can proceed or not. And this is exactly what attribute-based access control is all about. It uses attributes such as subscription, geographic location, or other attributes to make a decision. In the example of Netflix, another attribute which it could check is, for example, let's say it's a child profile. Then it's also going to check the PG rating of the movie. So you see, it's a very smart way of determining access to a resource by a subject. Now let's delve a bit deeper. So attribute-based access control always checks the attributes or characteristics. Now attributes of what? We discussed the attributes of the subscriber or the user, okay? But there are basically three different categories of attributes that can be checked. So the first one is the attributes of the subject itself. So remember, subject is sort of like the person or the system who wants to perform certain actions on an object or a resource. The second type is object. So object is the resource on which the actions are currently being performed. So the decision could be based on the attributes or characteristics of the object itself. And thirdly, it could be the action. For example, is it a read request? Is it a write request? Is it an edit request? Those kind of things. So let's dive a bit deeper. For the subject, the attributes could be job title. So for example, the system may check if it is a manager or a system administrator, allow access. If it's an internee or, for example, customer support agent, don't allow access to this system, for example. In terms of security clearance level, it could be, does the subject have, for example, top secret security clearance, or does it have secret level security clearance? And then based on that, it can make the decision whether to allow or deny. Another could be the department. So for example, does the subject belong to finance department? So let's say it's a payroll system. In that case, the system may check, does the subject or the person who wants to access the system, does he belong to the finance department? If yes, then go ahead. If not, then stop the access. It could even be the location, as we just discussed in the case of Netflix. So for example, you have an active subscription and everything is perfect, but are you currently located in the correct geographic location or the one that is being allowed or not? Similarly, for object, it can be file classification. So for example, let's say the subject has secret level security clearance, but the object or the file has top secret classification. In that case, it won't be allowed. It can be region restriction. So there are two types of geolocations. Okay, one could be that of the subject. So where is the subject currently located? Where is he trying to access the resource from? And the second could be the object itself. So for example, if the object is located in X country, don't allow access from Y country. So two different types of geolocations that could be considered. And there are so many different combinations that are possible as well. Another attribute could be the ownership. Who owns that object? So just to give you an example, Let's say you have a copywriter in your organization who creates contents and that can be read by anyone in the organization. Now, in that case, if the object or the content that has been created, if the owner is the copyright person, then yes, allow anyone to access that. On the other hand, let's say the CEO has created a marketing strategy or a marketing plan. In that case, based on the ownership of the document, let's say only C-level managers or higher level executives could be allowed. Similarly, it could be based on action. So, subject who's performing the action, object on which the action is being performed, the file or the web server or the system, and then the action itself. Like for example, let's say you have a Google Docs document that you have shared with everyone, but you only allow read access. Now, if someone wants to try to edit that document, so based on the action that they're performing, they could be allowed or denied. Similarly, it could be the time of access. So for example, let's say you work in a restricted organization and after 12 o'clock, let's say at midnight, after midnight, no one is allowed in the building. You can access the building anytime, let's say from 6 a.m. until midnight. So if you try to go there at 1 a.m., for example, so based on the time of access, you may be denied access. Third is the type of device. This could be, for example, let's say you're trying to access a company's resource or a database server, but if you're using the company's provided laptop, then yes. But if you're using your personal device, then block the access. So you see, you can have so many different combinations. And the nice thing about attribute-based access control is that you can combine these as well. Let me give you an example. So you can create an attribute-based access control rule that if the subject is the manager and he's located in Australia and he's trying to access this resource during the daytime, then allow access. So you can already imagine you can create so many different combinations based on action, object, and subject attributes. So that's why it's one of the most flexible access control models available. Let's discuss the strengths and weaknesses of attribute-based access control or ABAC. So the first strength is that it provides very fine-grained access control. Policies can be highly specific, combining multiple attributes of subjects, objects, and actions. The second advantage is flexibility. It is highly adaptable, and new users or resources can be incorporated without having to create several roles. And moreover, you can pick any combination that you want based on subject, object, or action attributes. Another advantage is context awareness. So for the other access models that we discussed, they don't have the context. For example, they don't consider what time of the day it is, what is the geographic location, those kind of things. But ABAC is really designed for those kind of things. So very flexible and very context aware. Where is the subject located? What is the time of access? Who is the owner of the object? Where is the object actually located? Is the subject using a company provided laptop or not? So those kind of things, they cannot be captured by other models. So ABAC is an excellent model for those kind of restrictions. Another interesting point is that with ABAC, you don't have the role explosion problem, which we saw in RBAC. So in RBAC, basically what happened was that you sometimes need to create several different roles. Especially if there are just tiny differences between roles, then you'll have to create sort of like clones of the same role with just one or two different rules. However, here it's very flexible. You just need to pick the right combination and you don't care who's doing the access. It could be an IT admin, it could be someone from finance, it could be an internee. You don't care about that. You just care about the checks. If this and this and this, then allow. So it's very powerful and you don't need to create many different roles. Now, what are the disadvantages? The first is that it does offer a bit of increased complexity because the administrators now have to deal with the heightened complexity of designing and implementing such a system. The real issue is that it takes effort to manually define and assign attributes to subjects, objects, and actions. It does provide a lot of flexibility, but it also increases the complexity a little bit. The second is the challenge of scalability. The thing is that if you have thousands of users and thousands of resources, this can pose somewhat scalability challenges. And finally, it can be a bit difficult to basically have a proper audit trail, because you can have so many different combinations and then you're not really tracking the role or the person itself, you're just checking the combination. So it can pose some difficulties in audit.